I'm Scott O'Grady, and I've been asked to come and share with you an experience that I had when I was an F-16 fighter pilot, and I was flying peacekeeping missions for a United Nations resolution of a no-fly zone over the skies of Bosnia, where an embroiled civil war was occurring, and there I was shot down, and I spent 6 days evading and surviving in enemy territory to where I was finally rescued in a daylight rescue. Have you ever had a bad day? Well, this ended up being a day that turned into 6 days of fighting for my life. And I want to share that story of survival with you. But beyond just trying to entertain you right now with an adventure story, let me do something more important. Let me bring you into that experience. Let me share with you what I was going through mentally and emotionally and physically and spiritually when death did come and knock on my door more than once. But let me also explain to you that during this trial, I had inspiration. And the inspiration that carried me through this difficulty came through the things I cherish the most in life. It came through the love I have for God, the love I have for my family, and the love I have for my country. See, I look at my entire combat experience through my faith. While flying that F-16 over war-torn Bosnia, unexpectedly, a Soviet surface-to-air missile impacts my aircraft 10 feet behind my seat. My airplane explodes around me. I'm being burned before I can even eject out of the aircraft. I ejected over 5 miles above the earth at equivalent airspeed of around 500 miles per hour. I had a parachute descent that lasted up to nearly half an hour. Before I even hit the ground, the enemy was ready there to capture me immediately. I'm now hunted down in a country where I don't even have the right to live. For 6 days, I'm desperately trying to talk to somebody on the radio. Finally, friendly forces hear me. The United States Marines came down in the helicopters. They picked me up as we're flying out. We're being shot at by surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft artillery, small arms fire. And that ended up actually being the most positive 6 days I've ever had in my life. And I don't want to recommend a near-death experience to any of you. But the reason why it was such a positive experience in my life was solely because of my faith. I was able to explore that relationship I have with God in-depthly, like never before. My weaknesses and my strengths were completely exposed and out on the table. But I didn't have revelations or new lessons being learned. What I had were all the old lessons that I was growing up with my family and in my church and even at school. And that was the lesson I learned, was that even in the face of death, the greatest source of peace, comfort, love, and strength that I can ever find in this life comes solely with my relationship that I have with God. But I found out, though, that it's not so much to be a person of faith as it is to maintain trust. Now, if you'd have come up to me, though, while I'm lying underneath the branches of the trees, and the enemy's walking by me with their rifles ready there to either kill me or capture me, and at that time, if you snuck up to my hiding spot with a contract saying, "Scott, let's make a deal. And the deal is, when you sign this contract, that you will give up all your worldly possessions. Anything that's material will be taken from you. But when you sign this contract, the deal we make is we return you back the most valuable thing you have here in life, that being your family." I want you all to know that for me to be able to go home to see my mother and my father and sister and brother again, I would have signed that contract in a split second. Because my family means more to me than anything that's material in this world. They were the sole reason why I had a will to survive out there, or, even a reason to be able to come back home. But now I'm 80 miles into hostile territory. There are no friendlies out there, and there are 3 armies fighting around me. At that time, you would have thought I would have felt very isolated and lonely and secluded from the rest of the world, but I didn't. And the reason was that I had a team there supporting me and inspiring me in my time of need. And that team actually went beyond the military team I was a part of. Because the team that meant the most to me in my difficulty of surviving out there in that war zone was actually a team right back here in my home. See, that was an American team that inspired me. For I knew that all of you here were not going to forget about me. That all of you were going to make sure that I was rescued. And I want you to know I never doubted that. And I don't know how I can really even convey to you in words as to how much that meant to me. Knowing that while I was wearing our nation's uniform, serving our country in a foreign land, that I had the support of the American people back home meant the world to me. And whether you knew it at that time or not, every single one of you here today was a part of the inspiration that helped me survive and live through that experience. And I want to personally thank you for that. Now, the day that I went in to work on the 1st of June, I'd actually been away from my permanent assignment where I was down at a temporary assignment at the headquarters for operations over Bosnia. And I was a unit representative at the time, just doing desk work for over a week's period of time. And I came back to where I'm permanently assigned as an F-16 pilot in northern Italy at a base called Aviano. And you would think that as a pilot, my primary job is to fly an airplane. But in a squadron, we all have supervisory duties where we have to run different functional shops, whether it be the scheduling shop, the training shop, the weapons shop, intelligence office. I had just taken over to run the unit life support shop. So I'm sitting down at my desk going through paperwork when a good friend of mine, who's our scheduler, comes up to me and he says, "Scott, tomorrow on the schedule, the 2nd of June, I have here an opening to fly a mission over Bosnia. I'm writing your name down so you can fly that mission." But he reminded me that for the next month and a half, all we had were training missions. But he told me that because I was going to be able to fly this one combat mission in the month of June, that it would still qualify me for my hostile fire pay bonus for that month. See, as a fighter pilot, when we flew over a combat zone, whether it was one day of the month or 30, it didn't matter, we'd all receive a bonus of $150. Well, I want you all to know it was not worth that $150. And we laughed and joked about the fact that we even got a bonus because none of us were there for the money. I don't know if anyone who joins the military trying to get rich. No, you volunteer because you believe in serving your country and defending our freedom and our way of life here as Americans. And that's the only reason why you put on that uniform. Now, when I went into work on the 2nd of June, I met up with my flight leader, Captain Bob Wright. We're both equally qualified to lead combat missions. Only one person can lead at a time. And as the assigned leader for that mission, Wilbur had to make the decisions, run the tactics, keep tabs on the weather, and talk on the radio. I was there solely to be his wingman, fly a good formation off of his aircraft, and now back up his decisions. Our mission was to enforce a no-fly zone over the skies of Bosnia. For those of you that remember, there was an atrocious war that was occurring there throughout the 90s. And we had atrocities that we hadn't seen to the civilian populace in Europe since the likes of Hitler. Genocide was occurring there, concentration camps, incidences where death squads would go into villages, line up all the men and the teenage boys and execute them in cold blood, bodies dumped into mass graves, people burned alive in their houses, women would be systematically raped there for psychological warfare, people would step on landmines and be maimed or killed. Young children or elderly people might try to cross the street to get to the only water source in a town to be shot at by snipers. A lot of innocent lives are being destroyed there. And the international community saw this and wanted to de-escalate the violence. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by enforcing a no-fly zone over the skies of Bosnia, which would prevent any of the warring factions from flying their aircraft overhead so that they just can't drop bombs on people on the ground and use air superiority to their advantage. So as part of the NATO alliance, we came in to police that UN resolution. But I want you to envision some things that are very important. We were not there as a warring faction. We were there solely on a peacekeeping effort. But yet we're still in a hostile environment. What does that mean? It means that all of the integrated air defense systems of Yugoslavia are still intact. All their radar sites can look up and watch where we're flying 24 hours a day. They knew exactly where we were all the time. All their communication posts can listen in on our frequencies to know everything there was to know about our operations. There were no secrets out there. But then even more threatening to us as pilots, all the large gun emplacements that we call AAA and surface air missiles would still be actively there and able to shoot up at us. And the rules of engagement were that if we were shot at by a ground site, we cannot immediately roll in and attack that site to defend ourselves. All we could do is try to dodge the missiles or bullets and vacate the area. Well, that was like walking through a minefield out there on our peacekeeping effort. And as you can see on a map, Bosnia is not a large country. It took us about 2 hours to randomly patrol the entire area. But on this mission, we were not asked just to randomly patrol the entire AOR. We were specifically assigned to monitor the northwest sector of the area. Now, to do that, as pilots, we fly in an oval racetrack pattern called a combat air patrol. But when we stepped out to fly that day, Intel told us, when we fly in that combat air patrol in the northwest sector, we'll have missile sites to the west of us, to the north of us, and to the northeast of us. What we didn't know is that because we were flying that same pattern for over a year's period of time, Serbian forces had seen that we were predictable, brought in a mobile radar-guided missile site called an SA-6, placed it below where we were flying all the time, camouflaged it to set up a trap, and unfortunately, I'm the one that gets caught in that trap. Wilbur and I are flying in a formation we call tactical line abreast. That means we're actually parallel to each other about 2 miles apart with an altitude stack. We're heading in our westbound direction. We're looking out for enemy aircraft with an onboard radar and our visual lookout. And on the radio, I remember Wilbur saying, Basher 5-1, threat east. Immediately, I look inside my cockpit. I don't have a warning. I tell Wilbur I'm in the clear. Wilbur's warning goes away within seconds. But not only are we talking to each other about this possible threat, there's an airborne command post that hears our threat call. And it radios up to the U-2 reconnaissance aircraft overhead and other intelligence gathering networks to see, was there a threat emitting below us that we didn't know about? Well, if the word had come back that a threat was below us, we would have vacated the area. But instead, we were told we were in the clear, or so we thought. As we came up now to the Croatian border, we can't cross that for political reasons. We turn our eastbound leg. And after flying down track for a few minutes, I receive a warning now on my airplane. I'm looking outside to see if we're being shot at. I never saw the missile. Immediately on the radio, I tell Wilbur, Basher 5-2, threat east. He responds by telling me that he doesn't have a warning indication. From the time I get that warning to where the missile impacts is about 6 seconds. I'm shortly underneath the parachute right after that. I never had enough time to dodge the missile or even put out a decoy. All I remember is seeing this red flash go off the right side of my aircraft, and then bam, the missile impacts. Now, it wasn't until after I'm rescued where I'm able to talk to Wilbur on the phone for the very first time from my hospital. And I told him, I said, I never saw that missile. What happened during that engagement? He said 2 missiles were actually shot, and that they came up from underneath us. He said the first missile went right in between our aircraft. The second one that came up hit dab smack in the belly of your airplane. He said, Scott, I saw the airplane explode and it broke up into pieces. The cockpit section sheared off while it was on fire, and it fell off into the clouds where I didn't see eject, I didn't see a parachute, and I thought you were dead. You know what I told him? I said, wow, that must have been really cool to watch. Who here sees something like that in real life? We started laughing about it, and I thought, wait a minute, that's not that funny. It's a moment in my life where I almost died. The only thing I can conclude about laughing about a near-death experience is that in all of our lives, we're going to face trials and difficulties of all different sorts. But we're also going to experience joyful, wonderful times. But no matter where you are in that roller coaster ride of life, I think it's important to maintain a sense of humor about things. Because when that cockpit now started to break apart in front of me and I'm immediately engulfed in flames, I thought my life was over right then and there. And at that moment, I was praying. I said, Dear Lord, if it be your will, I don't want this to be the end of my life. In a millisecond, I thought about how I'd lived a very blessed life for 29 years, been able to experience more than most people ever will in a lifetime. But selfishly, I still had something I wanted to live for. And please, dear God, if it be your will, I don't want this to be the end. Much to my relief, when I pull that ejection handle, the canopy on the F-16 departs, and I'm ejected out parallel with the horizon. And I can remember seeing a piece of the aircraft now flying around me. And it's here that if I will let the ejection system work on automatic mode, the seat will have me in a free-falling down to an altitude of 15,000 feet, then the parachute should automatically open up. Well, that's only if everything's working right. You have to understand, I just came out of an airplane that just blew up around me, and I'd been burned. So I figured the parachute that's behind me in the seat, it's probably been burned as well. It may now never open. So now I'm looking down at the ground 5 miles below me as I'm falling towards it, thinking I just might fall to my death. And that deeply disturbed me. Because I have to make a confession, I'm afraid of heights. So I wanted to know if that parachute would even function at all. Well, there's a manual override handle on the right-hand side of the seat. Much to my relief, when I pull that handle, the canopy opens up on the parachute, my descent rate slows down. This is now the first time I actually have the ability to think about what was happening to me. Prior to that, I was just reacting to stay alive. Well, this is where all that training I'd received in the military, from the time I entered pilot training through survival schools and continued life support training, I knew all that emergency procedural training was there to save my life. So I instinctively went through my emergency checklist of checking canopy, visor, mask, C-kit, LPU, 4-line release. And as I go down my emergency checklist now, I'm looking out over the countryside of Bosnia. And I want you to know, from that high above the ground, it's a very beautiful country. And I could see a large city off to my west and a highway that ran off to the east. Now, to the north of that highway, there's open farmland. To the south, there are hilly and mountainous terrain and a scattering of forest areas. But everywhere I look, I see farmhouses and villages. It's a very populated area.